Hi, everyone. And today I've been joined by Nicole Williams. And Nicole Williams is a leading expert in Charlotte Mason homeschooling. She is the author of the 27-book Living Science Curriculum. She's also the founder of Sabbath Mood Homeschool and host of the Delectable Education podcast. And recently, she just released her Nature Explorers curriculum, which is why I have invited her to come and talk with us about nature study today. She has over 2 decades of experience educating and inspiring thousands of parents and teachers around the world. So thank you, Nicole, so much for joining us so that we can learn more about nature study.
Thank you, Joy. I'm so happy to be here.
So I want us to just start off and talk about what is nature study, because I think a lot of people think that it is the embodiment of a Charlotte Mason education. And of course, we know it's just part and parcel, but it does help our students cultivate lots of different things that they can use in other areas. Can you kind of define it for us? Help us understand it for the very newbie, what it looks like?
Yeah. I was so sold out for Charlotte Mason because of nature study. That was the entire reason I flipped and went towards her versus the like $500 box of curriculum that I had just purchased. I kind of switched gears just because of the words nature study. But then when I started looking it up in her volumes, it was not entirely clear to me what that meant. I understood that it was really important to her, but I just couldn't get it just felt like juggling. There was all these balls in the air that I couldn't figure out how they came together. So the main thing I think we need to understand is that Charlotte Mason saw it. Well, first of all, she didn't use the word nature study except for a few times. And once she put it in quotes, like it was a weird thing to say. So what she
Oh,
called
funny.
it, yeah, she called it field work, field
Oh,
studies, things like that. And that has like a different connotation when you think about it like that. That field work has more a sense of like we're going to go out and do something important, study something rather
yeah.
than kind of like just galloping through the hills kind of thing. So I so I think that she really thought about it as the biological foundation to science education. So
Right.
if we think about it like that, we have some of like the why, what is nature study, and then also what we find is that there's all this other stuff that comes out of it, like you said, like observation skills that help our littlest children. If you're going to look at two flowers, they're both yellow. How are they different? Are they different? And when we start looking more closely at things like that, they have a better chance at looking like the letter B and the letter D and being able to notice, okay, what's different about these two? Because they're very similar. So it
Right.
has these great benefits to our life, but structurally, there are like five different parts that make up nature study. And so maybe we'll talk about those a little bit
Yeah,
as
and
we
I
go
think
along.
that's what trips a lot of people up is because there are so many different parts. It's like, well, is reading this book nature study? Is that it? Or when we
Yes.
just go on a nature walk, is that nature study? And it's like, yes, and yes, and
Yes.
yes.
And yes.
Can you
Right.
talk about how those five different parts actually all help support one another and why we don't
Yeah.
just isolate and say it's only doing nature journal or it's
Right.
only reading a book about nature because it's not
Yes.
mutually exclusive. They all help build those connections.
Right, right. So one time I moved across the country. Ironically, it was back to my hometown, but I had never done Charlotte Mason type of education when I lived there. But I lived outside all the time. And when I got back there after having been gone for 15 years and knowing a lot more about nature through nature study, I realized I didn't know the names of any of the flowers, the birds, like I knew nothing. I had an appreciation for nature, but I didn't know what was around me. And so I began what is nature study. And that was, I went on walks and I looked for things. So that's one of the things. I started journaling. What was I noticing? And the act of drawing in our nature notebook helps us to look even closer. what specific habits are we seeing in that plant maybe, or that animal? Maybe we're doing it from memory. That visualization component comes into there, and notes we make about it. I began to read books about it. And that, I'm thinking this study I was doing was flowers, wildflowers. What could I learn about the flowers in my area? So that's like our nature lore that we read about it. So all these things, and note that one of the important parts is that I was making a seasonal special study. There's really no use in making a study of something that I can't see. If I'm going to make a study of giraffes, I'm not going to be able to go look at them. Or if it's in the middle of depth of winter and I'm making a study of wildflowers, well, I could do that, but I'm only going to have the little brown ones that stayed. I'm not going to be able to see their life cycle and stuff like that. So all these parts just kind of go together. Now, the last one that I haven't mentioned is object lessons. And what that is when we ask questions, whether it's of ourselves or we ask it of our children, questions to get our eye to look closer. So you think about like the bird, the robin. If I ask you what color is its beak, you may not know just because you know what a robin looks like. But if I ask you that, your eye immediately goes to the beak and wants to know, okay, there, I have an answer to that question. And it's through observation that you're able to do that. So object lessons allow us to get our kids to look closer and learn to ask questions when they're outside in nature. So you can see where all 5 of those things come together around a subject. They are all supporting this special study we're making that's seasonally based. So we talk about our nature walks, and that's great, but we want to be able to, like, we're studying trees. Let's go look for trees. What's happening with the trees at this time of year, and looking at those kinds of things.
So it's important, sounds like, to be inquisitive, to be naturally curious, to
Mhm.
use the resources of books and in our own eyes, and
Yes.
then really engage with nature. It's not, it sounds like, not something that we're just going to check off a list and say, I've done that, and
Yeah.
just been maybe more impersonal. It's so easy to have be so overwhelmed that we attack things that way. But this
Right.
is like the antithesis of the checklist. It's
Right.
immersion.
Exactly. And we
So my
also
question, oh,
we
go
hear
ahead.
Charlotte Mason talk about outside time, so much outside time. And I think we get that kind of convoluted with nature study too, because yes, they're supposed to spend a lot of time outside, and these nature walks seem very undirected and just wandering through. But nature study, if we think back on those terms like field work, there is real purpose behind it. And it doesn't need to take a long time, but there is more purpose than just being outside.
Right. So we're not going to be doing field work for 6 hours a day.
Yes.
It's a focused time. So my
Yeah.
question is, what do you see are some common pitfalls that keep families from doing nature study at all? Because I have spoken to so many families who just say, yeah, I feel like I should do that, but I just never get around to it.
Yeah.
And of course, we think it's so essential for the hearts and minds of the children to help them cultivate so many different habits. And of course, the relationship with God's world, that's essential. And that's really a big something that's really lost in our modern culture with our screens
Mhm.
and everything. So, what are you seeing as common pitfalls, and how are you seeing people overcome them?
I think that the main pitfalls are a lack of knowledge, a
Mhm.
lack of direction. What in the world do I do out there?
Right.
And a lack of motivation to get
Mhm.
out there on, the day that's not this great spring weather, it's yucky, or it's too hot, or it's too cold, or it's rainy, or something like that. So
Right.
with regard to knowledge, I think that it is okay that parents don't know. It's okay for them to learn right alongside of their kids. There are resources. You offer resources. I offer resources that they can literally just open it up and do the next thing. And
Right.
they will learn just right at the same time as their kids do. And so we should just scratch that one off. Don't worry about not having the knowledge about nature to do this. Um,
Right.
with regard to direction, it's what we were just talking about. We don't know what in the world we're supposed to do when we get out there. And
Right.
And so again, I would say that there's kind of like two angles at this question. Again, there's resources that are kind of open and go that will just walk you through what you need to do. But at a bare minimum, try to figure out one of those five things. You know, if it's just getting on a nature walk every week, and then next term start adding in some object lessons. Probably you're already reading the books because people are usually pretty good at that part. And just kind of add to it. If you're scared to death of nature notebooks, one term, make it your goal that this term we're going to figure out what we're doing here. We're going to learn how to draw. You have some resources for that. Try and help us to learn that. Do you know that actually brush drawing is one of the easiest ways that you can get on paper what you're seeing
Yeah,
without being much of an artist at all? It is incredible.
right.
Yeah.
Well, and that's actually why I'm incorporating brush drawing into my online nature study course, was because we were doing a lot of pencil work
Yeah.
and it just kind of always stayed, brown, black and white. We never got around to filling it in with color. And once I started teaching my kids how to brush draw. My son, after we went on a wildflower walk, came home. He painted a trout lily and he goes, Mom, it actually looks like the trout lily. Look at this.
Yes.
And it was the same. It was like we had done a daffodil lesson just that week. So it really kind of correlated. But I was like, oh man, what have
Yes.
we been doing? We haven't been having that connection of the art lesson with then
Mhm.
now let's go explore something similar.
Right.
And it is fast. That's
It
what's so fun.
is. It is super fast. You know that in the in Charlotte Mason school, they had a goal to keep their paintings as quick as possible. And I read where they
Hmm.
talked about making their drawing within 4 minutes. And
Hmm.
so if you think about like one of the things that we struggle with as parents is time, you know, when are
Yeah,
we going to sit down for an hour for everybody to make a nature journal entry? Well, we
right.
don't need to. We don't need to do that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I think perfection is another enemy of the nature journal because we do
Mhm.
see, I I have nature journals of my children. I'm not probably going to share on Instagram.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it just, they wrote their name all over it. They added, a fairy or something, and you're just like, hey, man.
Yeah.
But I think that that's important to understand. Like, they're not all a work of art. It's more of a a document of what you saw, what you
Yes.
connected with. That it's helping you really get to see and be brave. It's like making that first touch of paint on the
Yes.
page.
Yes. Yes.
But the more you do it, the more you go, oh, I can
That was
fix it.
easy.
Or
Yeah.
I could just wipe it off because it's watercolor.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
So,
But so
oh,
the
good.
last one was motivation. And this one's the hardest. I really think that there's a couple things. Some of the parts that we've talked about, you can just work into your morning schedule so that they are just on the list. Like they are things that
Yeah.
you accomplish. And when it
Yeah.
comes to things that aren't, like I used to really struggle with afternoon occupations because I like the morning, it's I used to feel like an air traffic controller. Like you're working hard in the morning to get all the kids going the directions, following their schedule, doing all their things. By
Right.
afternoon, I wanted to be like, I'm done with all of you. Like, I'm not going on a nature walk with you. You know? But really, there's so much benefit to it. And so, if we can do
Right.
something where we have some accountability, like maybe we meet with a friend, maybe we say, hey, I'm going to lead the object lesson when we figure out how to do that, or we use a resource to do that so that we have that accountability. The other thing is, it's pretty traditional, I think, to take a nature walk on Friday because we kind of look forward to the end of the week. But if your motivation levels are real low by Friday, take your nature walk on Monday. You know, do something
Yeah.
like figure out what you need to do. And then be prepared. Get yourself totally prepared so that you have comfortable clothes if it could possibly rain or if it's cold so that everybody is comfortable and you know we can do this. You know, it doesn't have to be a
Right.
long walk, but we can do this. And I think that all helps
Right.
motivation quite a bit.
Yeah. We had a few years where we met in the middle of the week, either a Tuesday or a Wednesday. And it was actually the most consistent
Yeah.
nature group that we had. The Friday groups, did not,
Yeah.
the consistency was a struggle. And that,
Yeah.
because you almost feel like it's more of a school subject when you do it in the middle of the week,
Right.
whereas it's more like this optional hangout time, which was
Yeah.
also frustrating because like I wanted to do object lessons and like nature journal entries, and everybody else is like, we're talking and playing, obviously.
This is useful
Anyway, so
too.
just read the
Yeah.
room. So I'm curious about your Nature Explorers guide. We talked about maybe pulling up the guide so that, or
Sure.
a week, so that you can kind of walk us through what that looks like. Because this is for Form 1, which is, you could do kindergarten or first grade through third grade, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. And
Or a very
I
new student.
or a new student. Yeah, I think that's the thing, and that's why I labeled it level 1,
Yeah,
because I wanted people to understand that they can do it with children who are younger. I mean, who are older. I can't think and
right.
share a screen at the same time, but but students who are older, because it's the basic information. It's the stuff that they need to know from the beginning. So you can kind of run through it faster. Maybe you don't spend 3 years in level 1 with an older student, but it's a good
Right.
foundation. So let
Well,
me
and
go.
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to go down the screen, but you go ahead and say what.
Well, I was going to say, so this was the other question I had for you is that, as we were looking at level 1, we're thinking about where we want the child to be by the time they get to high school, which you
Yeah.
have a high school program that you're going to be releasing at the end of the summer.
Yeah.
And I just felt like that was so important to think through. Okay, as we're developing these foundational skills that you're going to show us about now,
Mhm.
what is the goal for how they're going to take this on for themselves so that it's
Right.
not always mom dependent, which it must be when they're little or it's new.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So in those days, I mentioned doing object lessons where we're asking questions. What color is it? How does it fly? What kind of tree is it in? Is there any more of them around? These kinds of questions where we're starting to think scientifically, really.
Yeah.
When we prime a child, well, two things are happening there. When they are answering those questions, they've got to come up with words. They have to come up with language that they may not have to work with yet. Like, what color is the robin's breast? Well, it could be like russet. It's might be red, reddish brown. They got
Right.
to come up with that, and that's totally fine. Is
Right.
there a group of them? Maybe I'm estimating how many are there. So there's a lot of scientific stuff going on, but I'm teaching them to ask those kinds of questions of themselves so that
Right.
as they get older and they see something new and interesting, they can quickly run through the questions. I remember one time looking out my window and seeing this bird that I'd never seen before. I'd never noticed it, had no idea what it was. Ran through this whole list of questions. What color is this? What color is that? How does its feathers lay? Does it have a crest? All these questions that I kind of learned to ask. And then I went to my field guide to look for it. It wasn't there. And then I went to a different field guide that had
Oh,
drawings, not just photographs. And I
oh,
found that it was a juvenile bluebird. And I just had never seen one of those before.
oh,
And
cool.
so asking these questions, that's what we want to have happen for our kids, is that and then that the term I always say, like, we don't know what we don't know. But then
Right.
you also hear people who are older say, the more I know, the more I don't know. And that, it kind of creates a momentum in our lives. And so if we start helping our kids to know more about nature, they realize how much fascinating stuff is going on out there, and that curiosity takes over. And then, yes, as they get older into their teenage years, we really want them to be doing some studies independently and be looking at a region, a biome, and what are the interconnections here? What factors are at play that are human made? Some bigger questions that really go into the ecology and the environmental sciences. So yeah, there is a long scope that we hope to create.
Right. But we need guides like yours to help get our brains going in that direction because
Yeah.
this is new to so many of us. It's not something that we do as a culture in America. Most of the resources I get, and I'm sure you've noticed this, are from the UK. People who it's just more of a part of just their lifestyle of getting out and
Yeah.
observing and
Yeah.
just getting really deep into nature.
Yeah.
So let's go ahead and look at that guide.
Okay. All right. Let's share that in real quick. So it is organized by terms, by season. So if it's, used somewhere else, like Southern Hemisphere, you just pick up where you're at, not necessarily the totally Americanized. Or if you pick it up in the middle of the year, you can just jump to wherever you are. And each term has the special studies chosen for you. So in this particular one, wildflowers, wild fruits, birds, and reptiles. And then those are covered throughout the term. You don't have to make that plan. That's the big thing about this. Is I'm
Yeah,
sure decision making fatigue is one of the biggest problems for us homeschool moms.
right.
So let me go down to a particular lesson here and show you how it works. There's kind of a little bit of a hook here of what you're going to be learning about. And then this first part is the object lesson video. And I
Okay.
think this was a real hang up for moms too. Like, what am I supposed to ask questions about? Like, for instance, if you read in the Handbook of Nature Study about ants, there are some really fascinating things like ants go to war, they take slaves. You can turn over a rock and look if there are brown and black ants. Some of them are the slaves. They milk cows, which are
Right.
aphids. They do all
Yeah.
this interesting stuff. But if we have no knowledge of that, we can't ask questions to guide our
Right.
children. Right.
Yeah. Like if you didn't know that a peony actually needs the ants to eat the bud away. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
saw a bunch of ants on my peony and I knew because I had read it, I think it was Fabre or somebody. And
Yeah.
then you're like, oh, cool. I get to see that actually happening now. Instead of being
Right.
like, I need to spray ant killer on my,
My peonies. I know.
yeah, you're gonna ruin it.
Yes. So I've done these object lessons for the mom so that she could just do it right along with her kids. And it is just a series of questions. I am showing them a thing in this particular video. It's sunflowers. And I'm drawing out an understanding from the kids that they maybe wouldn't have had before, the types
Yeah.
of flowers that are in this compound flower. And then there is the nature walks. These are each of the 5 little guideposts that I call them, some goals that they can choose from to further their study while they're on their walk. Their nature notebook. What I did with this is I really followed what Charlotte Mason would have had them do. So I specifically say there, complete the following. Of course, you can make use of this however you want in your home, but she would have had them write something, so describe something,
Yeah.
paint a picture, and then they had book of firsts, just family books. Later, they had individual books, but things that you could be like, oh, it's the first time it snowed this year, things like
Mhm.
that we can be looking for.
So how
And
long would that section probably take, that nature notebook section?
the
Would you
nature notebook
expect?
session.
Would that be a couple different sessions throughout the week, or would that be one sitting?
I think that it could easily be either. We usually did it as one, but you could do a written description at one time, and then do a painting at another time in the week. Um,
If you remember.
yeah, this is part of the problem. I find that
Yeah.
there's 2 good ways to go about this. Is one is to lay them out on the table open before you leave for your walk so that when you come back in they're there and ready to
Oh, that's
go.
a good idea.
Yeah. And then another one is to build it into your schedule. Like this is
Yeah.
the time we do our nature notebooks. You could truly have a 10-minute time for this. If a child is young, you could really just have a quick 10-minute, maybe 2 10-minute lessons in your week to add these entries. I would say that really you don't need more than a half an hour. Some kids are going to want to take more. So that's why I think it really lends itself towards being an afternoon occupation so that if a
Okay.
child wants to spend more time on it, they can.
Right. And then also, what about setting them up for their best work instead of here's this assignment, they're going to rush through it and they'll write the smallest little thing that they possibly, not that my children have ever done this, but I'm
Ever
just
done this
thinking of
kind of thing.
some people's children might.
I really think that it's probably okay if the kids do a smaller writing, a smaller narration of this. I don't think it is quite like a history narration. Um, Anything on paper is going to be a reminder to them and going to do the activity of moving that walk, that time in nature from the side of the brain that is taking in the information and all the things they saw in order to spit anything out onto paper or orally. It has to move from one side of the brain to the other. And so that is how we have memories. So that's why it's so important for us to narrate. If your child isn't wanting to write very much, I would offer to transcribe for them, or I would ask them to narrate orally and then ask them which part they want to write down in that notebook. It
Sure.
really is supposed to be, the notebook is supposed to be theirs and however much they want to put into it. So, I mean, that like kind of rubs us wrong. But if we can get that narration out of them in another way and get them just to make an entry. So I think, yes, you need to make an entry. Yes, you need to make a drawing. What
Right.
those look like, how much effort you put into it, is kind of
Right.
up to you, actually.
Well, and I think that that's probably the tension of that principle of authority and docility that we are always needing to, I don't know, there it's a dance
Yeah.
because we do need to require certain things and have standards. And I think that's where our culture misses is that we don't have standards and we don't require anything of
Yes.
ourselves.
Yeah.
But as homeschool moms, sometimes we might err on the side of drill sergeant, and that's not good either.
Right. Right.
So I like that there's what you're talking about is more a relationship with our child. We're trying to help fill them out. We're trying to help them rise above and give that oral narration. But then we're also giving them tools with the brush drawing lesson or just the focused time outside that they have
Right.
what they need. I mean, they could always, trace that leaf in their journal, if
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
um, apprehensive.
Right. And
Well,
hopefully
so
by doing brush drawing lessons elsewhere in the week, they are required, say, to draw a twig in their drawing lessons. If they want to
right,
put that in their nature notebook, great. But if they're not
right.
comfortable with that yet, they're still at least building that skill. Yeah.
And I love having those two things separate, a scaffold that is required, and then the journal that, like, I know that you have this ability to do this.
Right.
So you have the next on your list is the nature lore, which I
Yeah.
have used your nature lore book list for many years now because they're some of my favorite books, and I could name some of them, but I'm so grateful and I'm so glad you added these. But that's a lot of books.
Yes.
So tell me how you're hoping a mom will use this list
Good.
and
Yes.
not, get overwhelmed.
I appreciate that question. So note that the instruction is to spend a few minutes reading about aster flowers. Charlotte Mason's students were assigned a pamphlet. So if we have a book that is, 100 pages long, that is not required. We are truly just wanting to read a little bit about this subject because there'll be things in there that we don't know that are going to inspire our curiosity. Like I
Right.
said with the ants, we don't know that stuff until we read about it. We are probably not the ones who are going to discover those things on our own. But
Right.
but Charlotte Mason said when they read about it in a book and they go out to try to find it, they actually make that discovery for themselves. She said that's the way she phrased it, that they are kind of
Awesome.
making it for themselves. So
Yeah.
the reason I have multiple books here is because there's multiple books available out there, and you might be able to get one through your library's lending. I had my library would give me books from other states. There was some good
Right.
options there. You might have one in your home. You might be able to borrow it from a friend. Some of them are old and you might be able to find it online. So that's why I didn't want to just put, a single book and say, you have to read this book. I wanted to give a broad options and then you choose whatever little slice is available to you.
Awesome. Well, that's
Yeah.
great. All right. Is this the last section or do we have
This is
one
it.
more after?
Nope,
Okay. The
this is
further.
it.
Okay.
And the thing with this is, I put this in here not so much because this is necessary at all, but because if you are working with children who are older, who are starting nature study, this might be a
Hmm.
good way to add on to look deeper at a subject. So
Hmm.
that's the reason I added those there.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are really fun. Well, thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that with us. And I appreciate you kind of went over kind of what is it going to be expected with the high school student, how the
Mm.
new child can, anyone or just the whole family who's new to nature study
Yeah.
can really just get started. And your guide is available on your website, sabbathmood.com. But
Sabbath
then
Mood
it's
Homeschool.
also Sabbath Mood Homeschool, yes.
Yes.
And then I saw that you have a printable, is it a printing company that you're working with that they can get it printed or?
They can, yeah, because my science guides are on Amazon and you can
Okay,
buy them printed there. But because this is a new product, I anticipate a few little tweaks and changes to it. And I didn't
okay,
want to, getting it changed through Amazon is tricky. So
okay,
I have a couple of instructions if you purchase it where you can get it printed at a discounted rate. So
okay.
that would be a good option. And then also I created a just a little handout that your listeners might want to listen to if they go to sabbathmoodhomeschool.com/ I did it HIP for however imperfectly podcast hip.
Okay.
And that just has a worksheet, a handout that is about getting outside for nature studies, getting
Okay.
outside for nature walks in particular when we're having trouble with the motivation behind that. So if they would like to go there, they
Awesome.
can download that. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. Say that again. It's sabbathmoodhomeschool.com/HIP.
HIP
There you go.
for
Hip. I like it.
however imperfectly podcast. Yeah.
Well, I think that is all that we have. I think our time is up anyway. So, Nicole, thank you so much for joining me and for helping us all understand a little bit more about nature study. You can find Nicole over at sabbathmoodhomeschool.com. And I am Joy Cherrick, and I don't think I introduced myself at the beginning. And I'm over at howeverimperfectly.com, and we'll be releasing my own nature study course online over there later this summer. So
That's
thanks you guys
wonderful.
for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.